you could have normal magnesium, but if your calcium's too high, that'll actually push down your magnesium and make it unusable. So we really want that balance. But, when you look at hair mineral analysis, there's a lot going on. There's a lot of rabbit holes you can go down. But the first 4 minerals on the panel, sodium, potassium, magnesium, and calcium, those are the 4 that really matter for everyone.
Welcome to Get Pregnant Naturally, where functional medicine and natural fertility solutions will help you get pregnant and have your baby. Hey everyone, I'm Sarah Clark, and my mission is to inspire, motivate, and empower you. Most of all, I want you to wake up. So with functional medicine, we can discover what causes infertility and eventually reverse the condition. Today, I'm welcoming Kendra Perry to the podcast, and we're digging into what mineral levels mean for your fertility. So Kendra Perry is a functional diagnostic nutritionist who helps women break free from hormonal hell so they can stop being a slave to PMS, weight gain, and unpredictable mood swings. She helps women balance their hormones naturally with functional lab testing, including GI pathogen screening, hormone testing, metals testing, and mineral analysis. Kendra is an expert in detoxification using hair mineral analysis and is trained under both Dr. Rick Malter and Dr. Lawrence Wilson. She is currently the head clinical advisor for Functional Diagnostic Nutrition, training other health practitioners in minerals, metals, and detoxification protocols. In January 2018, Kendra was awarded the Women's Nutritionist of the Year and presented Global Healthy and Pharm Excellence Award for innovations in women's health. She resides in Nelson, British Columbia, where she is a passionate skier, mountain biker, hiker, and rock climber. In her downtime, you'll find her on the beach, drinking kombucha, eating strawberries, and listening to true crime podcasts. Check out her website at Kendra, Kendra, Perry, Perry.net. And before we jump into today's show, don't forget to hit the subscribe button on iTunes or wherever you're listening to this. Make sure you never miss an episode of the show. Hey, Kendra, excited to have you on the podcast.
Hi, Sarah. Thanks so much for having me. I'm pretty excited to be here.
Yeah, awesome. Great. So can you share your journey with how you came to do this work?
Yeah, no problem. So I think I have a very maybe similar journey to other people who work in the health industry. I mean, I didn't intend to get into this. I had my own health issues in my early 20s, actually, and I actually woke up one day with a face full of cystic acne. Yeah, and I mean, that's pretty devastating, and I had no idea what was going on, and so that kind of it sent me to doctors. I got birth control pills. I got antibiotics. I got all that stuff. And it never really resonated with me and it wasn't helping. So I was like, okay, I'm going to heal this myself. And I decided to heal myself with the internet, which led me down many convoluted pathways. And I didn't really get the results I was looking for. I just pretty much got worse, even though I had shifted my diet quite a bit and I'd made a lot of changes, but I just really wasn't getting better. And eventually I started getting really bad insomnia. And then at some point that turned into a really kind of chronic fatigue where I was pretty much tired and exhausted and thinking about sleep from the moment I woke up to the moment I went to bed. Mm-hmm. And it was at this point I'd been doing some training in nutrition and I'd been doing some courses and I actually discovered the Functional Diagnostic Nutrition program with Reed Davis, which really changed everything for me because through that course, you do a lot of lab testing. And it was through this lab testing that I was actually able to uncover the root of what was going on with me. And once I saw the results I was having, I really wanted to share them with everyone else. So at that point, I made my career change. But the one thing, and I know we're going to be talking about minerals and hair mineral analysis today, that was the big one for me because I did all the gut testing and the hormone testing, the organic acids testing, and it improved my gut. It got rid of my insomnia. It cleared my skin, but the fatigue was so entrenched and it would not go away. And it wasn't until I actually discovered hair mineral analysis did I finally start to see a shift in my energy. And for me, that was the big turning point for me. So I'm a really strong believer in this test. I think it's really important for energy, but also for fertility, as we're going to get into today.
Yeah, awesome. Excited to learn more. Okay. Yeah, so let's just talk about why it's important to look at mineral levels as far as it relates to women's hormones and specifically fertility.
Yeah, absolutely. So I like to tell everyone that minerals are the spark plugs of the body. So really no function in the body is going to work if you don't have good mineral balance. And I say mineral balance because a lot of times we talk about mineral deficiency, but you can also have mineral excesses, which will cause other mineral deficiencies. And I think it's really important because minerals are very much involved in hormone production. Certain minerals will drive up estrogen, whereas others might drive up testosterone. So if you have too much of a specific mineral, it actually will directly affect your hormone levels, which of course can affect fertility as well.
Okay. So I'm going to go through some minerals here, and maybe first of all, share with us which ones are the important ones to look at for both female fertility and then male fertility.
Sure. Yeah. And so
to be separated, I don't know.
Okay. Yeah. And definitely with minerals, I mean, we do want to look at the individual minerals, but what matters the most is actually the balance or the ratio between the two. I talk a lot about mineral balancing. So we want to get, those, you could have normal magnesium, but if your calcium's too high, that'll actually push down your magnesium and make it unusable. So we really want that balance. But when you look at hair mineral analysis, there's a lot going on. There's a lot of rabbit holes you can go down, but the first four minerals on the panel, sodium, potassium, magnesium, and calcium. Those are the four that really matter for everyone. Those are the main minerals of the body. They are the main electrolytes, and they are involved in most of the bodily functions. So when you're looking at hair mineral analysis and when I'm working with clients, I'm really focusing on those four. But when it comes to fertility, we also want to think about some of the second level minerals like copper and zinc. And copper is a really, really big one for both men and women, but especially women. And zinc's a big one for men because copper is directly related to estrogen production, whereas zinc is very much a progesterone and testosterone dominant mineral.
Okay. So as far as the ratios then, so the first four you said, so sodium, potassium, magnesium, and calcium, could you kind of dig into a little bit of what that would be as far as balancing and what we specifically, or maybe, I don't know if we want to say, what are some of the symptoms of low, high?
Yeah. So, I mean, the most typical pattern that I see, this accounts for about 80% of the population. It didn't always used to be like this. 40 years ago, we had about 50-50 between slow metabolic types and fast metabolic types. And these days, we're about 80% slow metabolic types. So we're really seeing this big shift. And so typically what you see with that pattern is you see this really high calcium and magnesium, and then you see this really depleted sodium and potassium. And this is a big issue because, if you can remember from high school chemistry class, sodium especially is the universal solvent. So you actually need good levels of sodium in order to utilize magnesium and calcium. And so if you have low sodium, you get this excess of calcium and magnesium where it's actually getting pulled from the bone where primarily magnesium and calcium belong, especially calcium, and it actually starts getting deposited in the soft tissue. So you have these high levels on a hair mineral analysis, but you don't look at it as they're high in the body. It's actually that they are unusable and they're actually getting put where they don't belong, which is the soft tissue, which is the hair, the joints, the brain, and the organs. So that is a big issue. And the lower sodium gets, the more unavailable the magnesium and calcium becomes. And calcium especially is a really, really big issue for most people because the higher calcium gets above potassium, the more that actually slows the metabolic rate and the more that slows the thyroid. And thyroid health, of course, is very important with fertility and having a healthy metabolism as well. So the higher that calcium gets, the more we're unable to use thyroid hormones, which is a big issue.
Okay, I guess let's just go into some as far as why it becomes imbalanced in the first place, which can be a whole myriad of things. Is there anything else you wanted to say on the specific minerals before we kind of go into that question, or?
No, I think I'm good to go.
Okay, cool. So what is it that is depleting our minerals?
Okay, and that's a really good question. So there's a lot of things going on. So I think we're all aware that our food supply and the soils that our food are grown in are deficient. So, part of, not getting the proper balance of minerals has to do with our food quality. Another issue is our exposure to toxic metals. These are very prevalent in our environment. And they're in our personal care products. They're in building materials. They're in car exhaust. They're all around us. And those will actually compete with minerals and push them off binding sites. So that's one way that we don't have good mineral balance. But another thing that a lot of people don't know about is actually that we can have excess of another mineral which causes a deficiency. So I was talking about before that depletion of potassium and that excess of calcium, which will slow the thyroid. And what primarily drives that is actually copper excess. So copper toxicity is a really big issue for men and women, but especially women. And as a woman gets copper toxic, it will actually drive that calcium-potassium ratio apart. And the primary way that women actually get copper toxic is through the use of hormonal birth control or a copper IUD. So any, patch, ring, pill, needle, anything that has estrogen in it actually drives up copper in the body. And then of course the copper IUD is copper. And I think a lot of women take the copper IUD because they think it doesn't have a hormonal effect, but it does, because copper and estrogen move up and down in the body together.
Okay. Yeah. So, and then what about gut infections as far as that impacting our mineral levels too?
Yeah, exactly. Like certain infections, having poor digestion, having low stomach acid levels, having SIBO or other parasites, bacteria, yeast, of course, that limits our ability to absorb and digest those minerals. So that's a big one as well.
Okay. And also tap water too.
Tap water is huge. Tap water is a really, really big issue because, of course, it contains the chlorine, the chloramine, fluoride in some cases. And what those, they're called the halide metals, they actually displace iodine off of iodine receptors. And without iodine, you actually can't make thyroid hormone. It's actually really hard to have healthy levels of potassium and lithium when you have iodine deficiency, and it can actually drive up that calcium and slow your thyroid as well. So, tap water, you got to filter it, right?
Filtered water. Yeah. Glass or stainless steel bottle. Yeah. Okay. So you talked a little bit about hormonal birth control. So if we can dig into that and how that impacts, it affects our mineral levels and then our gut flora, but specifically, how does it impact our minerals?
Yeah. So the biggest one is copper, and copper is an interesting mineral because it hijacks the mineral system more than any other mineral. And so it drives up that copper on a deep tissue level in the body. Of course, that drives up calcium. It lowers potassium, but it also lowers zinc, because they are antagonists, meaning that they push kind of back against each other. So as copper goes up, zinc goes down. Zinc, of course, is important for progesterone and also for testosterone. So, important in female and male fertility. Absolutely. Zinc is also really important for immune function. So if we don't have healthy levels of zinc, we're way more likely to get infected with those gut infections. And then we also need zinc for the production of hydrochloric acid, which of course we need hydrochloric acid to digest and break down minerals. So it's kind of like this vicious cycle. Another thing, copper will also drive vitamin C out of the body. So we all know the importance of vitamin C. Copper will do that. Copper can interfere with certain B vitamins as well. So it has a pretty big effect on the mineral system, and you are at risk for copper toxicity even if you are no longer on the birth control pill, even if you were on it 15 to 20 years ago for 2 to 3 years. That can be enough to really throw your system out of whack so that you have these toxic levels of copper actually stuck and being stored in the organs and the tissues.
Yeah, we have a high percentage of people that are coming to us that have been on long-term birth control, or at least have been on some form of birth control, and now years later, struggling to have a baby. And so, related to copper. Okay. Copper, and then the other nutrient. So copper, calcium, potassium, zinc, vitamin C. So it affects all those levels. It
affects everything. It also affects the absorption of iron. So you can't utilize iron if you are copper toxic. It will drive up sodium, which increases the stress response. I think there's a lot more like stress related infertility cases these days as well. It will drive down a lot of other minerals in the body as well. So those are the big ones, but it has a pretty massive effect on the overall system.
And how does it impact the gut flora?
Yeah. So, I think the biggest thing, are you talking about birth control or copper?
Birth control.
Yeah. So it does deplete the gut flora. Unfortunately, it causes, a pretty severe dysbiosis. And then I think another way it affects the gut flora is in the depletion of zinc. So if we don't have good immunity, we're way more likely to get, infected with certain organisms. We're way more likely to have dysbiosis because those opportunistic types of bacteria can overgrow when our immune system is not able to do its job as it should.
And so, and again, a lot of people that come to see us, they have either parasite, worm, bacterial infection, fungal infection, then have been on long-term birth control. Not everyone has been on long-term birth control, but there is there seems to be maybe a correlation. So you're definitely saying there is one.
Yeah, absolutely. And I've seen copper toxicity, in women who are in their 50s and 60s who are on birth control pill in their 20s. So that's definitely a big cause. We can also get copper from swimming in public swimming pools. Copper is typically used as a disinfectant. So we will absorb it through our skin, and then drinking from copper pipes. A lot of us live in older homes, and you can usually look under your sink and see if you're drinking your water straight out of copper pipes as well.
And what about SIBO? How does that impact mineral deficiency?
Yeah, SIBO is a big one. I mean, SIBO, obviously the condition where the good flora is in the wrong place. So it's causing a lot of dysbiosis in the small intestine. And that's going to impact your mineral levels because you're not digesting or absorbing your food really well. And I actually tend to see a very typical pattern with the women I work with who have SIBO. They tend to have a pattern called a 4 lows pattern, which basically just refers to being extremely low in calcium, magnesium, sodium, potassium. So those 4 main minerals are completely in the toilet. And, there's no research on this, but this is a correlation that I've seen time and time again. And I think it's just because, it makes sense, right? They're not absorbing their minerals, so their status is really low. And this is a really common one I see with infertility as well, as that really depleted mineral pattern. And so their body, either a woman or a man doesn't even have what it needs to, create a healthy pregnancy or create healthy sperm.
So what allows SIBO to take root then in someone?
I think there's a lot of different things that will cause SIBO. I think a big one is parasite infections. Parasites will tend to paralyze the nerves, which are responsible for sort of this rippling effect that pushes that bacteria back to where it belongs. Sometimes there are physical adhesions in the gut, which can cause it. And I think a big one is people eating all the time, snacking all day long, grazing, and never really giving the body the chance for that rippling motion to happen. It's called the migrating motor complex, but it only happens when we're not eating. And it's supposed to happen every, I think couple hours. So if we're constantly eating, I think we don't ever allow that to happen. And it's very easy for bacteria to move back up.
And what about the different types of SIBO? Is it methane and the other one is?
There's hydrogen and methane, and there actually is a third type as well called hydrogen sulfide. The third one, the hydrogen sulfide, there's actually currently not a way to test for it, but it does exist. So that one's a tricky one. But yeah, there's 2 different kinds, and it's dependent on the type of bacteria that's doing the overgrowing.
And would either of them still impact your minerals? If you have it, it's going to lead to a mineral deficiency.
Yeah, I would say so. I think it's going to impact digestion in a really big way. The hydrogen tends to cause more diarrhea. The methane dominant tends to cause more constipation. But yeah, either of them are causing a dysbiosis. Basically, every time you eat, the bacteria are fermenting and consuming those carbohydrates rather than you. So you're missing out on a lot of minerals that would typically be in those veggies, right? That the bacteria get to eat instead of you.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so let's dig into the hair mineral analysis tests and kind of really why, how it works and
Sure.
What it does for us.
Yeah. So with the hair, the really great thing about hair is it's a very non-invasive way of testing, right? We don't have to get a blood draw. We don't have to poop into a cup, right? We just cut a little bit of hair off. And basically this is telling us about what is happening in the cell. Hair is just dead cells. So we know that this is what's happening in the cell. And this is really important because certain minerals, especially potassium, magnesium, they're intracellular. So they're 99% in the cell. So they're not in the blood. So we can't use blood testing as a reliable way to test for things like magnesium, potassium. With hair mineral analysis, the main thing to keep in mind is it is an excretion. So it's not really a straightforward interpretation. You can't just order a test and be like, oh, I'm high in this, I'm low in this. This means I need to take this, not take this, because it's an excretion. So we need to determine why is it being excreted. Is it being excreted because we have too much of it? Or is it being lost because we can't hold on to it? And if it's low, do we not have enough of it, or is our body retaining it for some reason? So it's really important to understand the entire system, the entire mineral system, in order to interpret it properly. But it really does show us that dynamic system. And that's really cool because certain ratios will tell me about the hormones. They'll tell me about adrenal health, thyroid health, blood sugar imbalance. It'll tell me about which side of the nervous system you're dominant in. It'll tell me about infections. I can see if there's chronic bacterial or chronic viral infections on there as well. So you can go really deep with it. You can get a lot of really good information from it.
And then, how do you use that to develop a protocol? And at what stage do you test with the hair?
So I run hair mineral analysis on every single client I work with. Because I think it's that important. And I found since I've started bringing it into my practice, it's really, really increased the results of my clients. Like people are just feeling better quickly. They have more energy. They feel, their brain fog goes away. They just feel overall just more vitality. And so, yeah, I think it's a really important test to run. And
just trying to figure out as far as, when, so you saying to run it right away, and then kind of what would the protocol look like?
The protocol. Yeah. So, I mean, I use it to customize a mineral vitamin program for a person. And we're not testing vitamins with hair mineral analysis, but the minerals all directly affect the vitamins and they all have little relationships. So we can actually, when I see a certain mineral is low, I'll know that you're deficient in a certain vitamin. So I use it to make sort of like, I guess, a customized multi-mineral, multivitamin for a person, giving them exactly what they need. And then I can also tell what foods they should be eating and what foods they should be avoiding. For example, if someone's, has magnesium deficiency, I'm going to recommend those higher magnesium foods. Or if they're really low in potassium, this one's common, I'm going to recommend that they do nettle and coconut water and maybe a potassium broth to try to boost those levels.
And then combined with with the Dutch test and with a stool test, things like that too?
Exactly. Yeah. I would say in the ideal situation, I like to run 4 tests. I like to run hair mineral analysis. I like to run urine metals, the Dutch test, and then the GI map stool test. I get a ton of information when I see all that stuff together.
Okay. And then as far as sort of circling back to fertility, so the hair mineral analysis test, looking at that, how does someone that's struggling with infertility, why is that important? Like we kind of, I guess, talked about the minerals and why they're important, but why specifically this test?
Yeah. So, I mean, I would say it's important not only for fertility, but everything. And it's just because the body won't work without good mineral balance and the body can't function. And I would say I've never seen like one specific there tends to be a lot of similarities to I tend to see that really depleted pattern. So the person who is low in calcium, magnesium, potassium, and sodium, they're just bottomed out in everything. That is a common one I see with infertility. Sometimes I tend to see a really high sodium potassium ratio, and that really greatly increases the stress response. And we know that, when there's a lot of stress in the body, oftentimes fertility is not really what the body is concerned with, right? If there's a lot of underlying stress. In terms of some of the minerals, like with magnesium, like I know magnesium deficiency is linked to, certain congenital abnormalities, uterine spasms, or even like a preterm labor. So that's really common with low magnesium. And then zinc deficiency, we need it for egg production. Men need it for sperm development and maturation. So, if we have imbalances in a lot of these things, it is going to directly impact our fertility. And especially with copper, right? Because we know that estrogen dominance is a primary contributor to not being able to fall pregnant. So if we have an underlying copper issue, we may never be able to get our estrogen levels down until we address the copper.
Yeah, really, again, digging further instead of just looking at the surface, digging into what's happening here, is to finding the why.
Absolutely, yeah.
So you talked about copper toxicity. As far as mercury toxicity or aluminum, what are you seeing there?
Yeah, so metals are really interesting. And so the hair mineral analysis does have, tests for many metals. But, what's interesting with metals is you're only going to see them on any test, hair or urine or stool, when they're being excreted. So there's no test out there that really tells us about total body burden. Because there just isn't anything to tell us, because they have certain storage sites. Mercury tends to get stored in the brain. So if it's being heavily stored in the brain and we're not excreting it, we're not going to actually see it on the test. And typically when I start working with a person, they're usually so depleted that we actually don't see any metals being excreted. And when I see no metals being excreted, I know that's a bad sign that they're probably storing them in the body. And as we remineralize the body and get things back into balance over time, we'll actually see the body starting to dump some of these metals, which is really interesting. Like 4 tests in, you won't even know you have mercury, and then all of a sudden it's high, and then on the next test it's gone because your body just dumped it. But mercury is a big one, and so is aluminum. I know with mercury actually interferes with your body's ability to metabolize copper and also iron. And it actually reduces your selenium levels, which is going to have a direct impact on your thyroid. So mercury is a big one. So is aluminum. Aluminum is going to interfere with bone development. It will interfere with your calcium and magnesium. I know mercury has been implicated in infertility in certain studies, and same with aluminum and a lot of the other metals, right? They're toxic. So we don't want them in our bodies because they will interfere with our function on a very deep cellular level.
And what about leaky gut? If we have leaky gut and then, we're eating this healthy diet, but we're not absorbing it, how does that come into play?
Yeah. And I mean, any digestive issue, whether it's SIBO, an infection, or leaky gut, which many people have, anything that prevents the proper digestion of food is going to contribute to mineral issues. But what's interesting is I found a lot of mineral issues actually are the reason why people have infections or something like leaky gut, because, they don't have the tools they need to have healthy immunity or to make stomach acid, which helps us, digest our food, but also kill off infections. And things like infections can contribute to leaky gut, especially SIBO and parasites. So yeah, any digestive issues are going to impact minerals. And then those minerals are going to in turn make the problem worse if they're out of balance and make the digestive issues even worse. So you can kind of get into a vicious cycle.
Yeah.
And it's definitely a chicken or an egg question, right? Which came first?
Mm-hmm, absolutely. Okay. So, and as far as the best test, which one are you recommending?
So there's only two that I recommend. And the reason for this is that most labs actually wash the hair samples, which is not good because that will actually artificially elevate some of those main minerals like calcium, magnesium, zinc, copper, manganese. So I only recommend Trace Elements International or Analytical Research Lab, so TEI or ARL. But out of those two, I recommend Trace Elements because they have a better panel. They have an extra, I think, 23 markers and 16 ratios. Then ARL, and it's the same price. So that's definitely the best lab to go with. I wouldn't do any other labs because as far as I know, every other one I found, they wash their hair samples. So that's not going to give you accurate results.
Okay. So Trace Elements or Analytical, what was the other one?
Analytical Research Labs.
Research Labs. Okay. And then how does the test work then? Obviously, I'm assuming you just chop off some hair? Or what?
Yeah, so you get exactly. So you get a test kit in the mail. You're going to want to take hair from the base of your skull so that you're getting recent results. Like you want to get an average of the past 3 to 4 months. So you're going to take about 1.5 inches and maybe I don't know how many strands, maybe 20 strands of hair. It's always scary when you start cutting it, but then you realize right away that it's actually not that much hair. And then you just put it in an envelope and you ship it to the lab. And once they receive it, they usually have your results ready in about 2 weeks.
2 weeks. Okay, great.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so based on the results, I'm not sure if you have a case study or anything you can walk us through with someone that was dealing with infertility, and then you got this test back and you were able to develop a protocol on kind of what it looked like.
Yeah. So I actually was very recently working with a woman who was pretty stressed out about getting pregnant because, she was in her kind of almost mid 40s and, feeling that crunch time. And, she wanted to go through with all these fertility treatments, but I don't know if it was fully resonating with her. So I was like, okay, give me 6 months, work with me for 6 months and let's see what we can do. And we did other testing, we threw the kitchen sink at it. We did the gut testing, the hormones, the metals, but she was in that 4 lows pattern, that really depleted mineral pattern. And she wasn't excreting any metals. I mean, she didn't have the ability to detox at that point because her minerals were so low. So we really focused on raising those 4 minerals. I work a lot with sea salt. We did a lot of unrefined sea salt to help raise the sodium, lots of coconut water, nettle, potassium broth to raise the potassium, some really high quality magnesium supplements in a higher dose. And I did some calcium supplementation as well, which I don't do with many people because most people have too much calcium, but with her it was necessary. And it took us about 8 months. And at about 6 months, she noticed a big shift in her energy levels and her sleep and just especially her endurance. Previously, she'd had some pretty serious exercise intolerance. And suddenly she was able to go running and just, have more energy to get out and do the things that she wanted to do. We did address some gut infections. We did address some estrogen dominance, but she did have a really big copper issue, but we didn't see it right away. Because sometimes when you have that 4 lows pattern, when you're so deficient, the body can't even eliminate copper. So we didn't see it until the 3rd test. And then all of a sudden the copper started coming out and she dumped it for a few months. And then at that point, I can't remember exactly when she got pregnant, but I feel like it was between 8 and 10 months after we started working together.
Oh, wow.
So it worked really well. Her situation progressed really well. I would say with a lot of situations, there's a lot of maybe more tweaking that needs to be done and more maybe challenges. Her situation progressed really smoothly, but that was a really cool thing to see.
Mm-hmm. And you said mineral broth. Sorry, you said potassium broth.
Yeah.
What's that?
So you can make broth out of some really high potassium foods. And this is a really good way to get potassium into the body because you need almost 4,500 milligrams of potassium a day for the body to run, which is a lot of potassium. And so the potassium broth you use the skin of potatoes. I think there's celery stalks, parsley, parsnip, carrots, and some ginger in there, and you basically brew it up into a broth. You can use it as a base for a soup, but I usually get a lot of my clients who are low in potassium, which is really common, to sip on it throughout the day. And you get about I think for each cup, you get about 1,100 milligrams of potassium.
Oh, wow. Okay. So potato skins, celery, parsnips,
Parsley,
ginger.
parsnips.
Okay. Anything else? Carrots, yeah.
And kelp.
Okay. Oh, kelp, yeah.
If you can deal with the kelpy flavor. Some people don't put that in because they don't like the way it tastes.
Yeah. And then how long would you just cook that for?
Yeah, I would say you cook it for a couple hours, maybe like an hour and a half to 2 hours, and then you just strain everything out. And yes, you can use it as a base for a soup, but it's actually really tasty. It's delicious, especially if you salt it up with your really healthy unrefined sea salt. Really good way to get potassium into the body. Same with coconut water. That is fantastic for potassium, and so is nettle. So you can brew like a nettle tea.
Yeah, I love nettle tea. So, okay, so you look at it in the tea form then. Is there any one that you recommend there, or just like the bag, or are you looking at the actual leaves and soaking, or?
Yeah, I usually get people to buy the bulk leaves and just do like an infusion. And actually, a friend of mine recently combined coconut water with chilled nettle tea, and it actually is delicious. So I really liked it. So that's a good summer drink if you need to get your potassium levels up. I
love nettle. I didn't think I would, but yeah, I love it. It's and also it's an adaptogen too, so it's good for stress, right?
Yeah, it's good stuff. Really good stuff.
And you say sea salt. What about Himalayan salt?
Yeah, so Himalayan salt, I think, can be used as well. I haven't been able to find anything to back it up. I have heard that it can be contaminated. So again, I worry about getting it from a good source, but I typically use Celtic sea salt. That tends to be my favorite. It has a bit of a better magnesium profile, but I would say Himalayan salt is probably fine. And then any sort of unrefined Celtic sea salt.
Okay. So as far as any supplement recommendations, what are you looking at there as far as strategies?
Yeah. So, I definitely don't like to recommend any supplements to anyone unless I have test results, especially with minerals, because we talked about the dynamic system and how all of them are going to affect everything else. But there are some things you can do. I would say sea salt is one of the best ways because, the most important minerals are calcium, magnesium, sodium, potassium. You're going to find those in sea salt. And so I usually recommend that people do about a 1/4 teaspoon of unrefined sea salt in every liter of water they drink. It's a really good way to get electrolytes and minerals into the body. There's also a really, really great multi-mineral formula. It's like a salt formula from a company called Trace Minerals Research. And it's called 40,000 volts. So the number 40,000. It's super salty. It doesn't taste great, but it's really, really good for it's super potent. It's the most potent liquid mineral formula I've ever seen. So I think it's great, especially if you're an athlete and you do a lot of exercise or you sweat a lot. You can do a couple teaspoons of that a day. You just kind of have to choke it down because it doesn't taste very good.
Salty, yeah.
Mm-hmm. The other supplement that I do love for most people, it's from a company called Oceans Alive, and it's marine phytoplankton. And have you heard of that?
Yeah, I have.
Yeah. So marine phytoplankton is really interesting because it contains every single mineral and vitamin that the human body needs. So it's very comprehensive. It includes everything. And again, it doesn't taste great. It tastes like murky seawater. But it's awesome. It's really good stuff. And you can do like a dropper of that or 2 a day. And that's a really great way to get those minerals into your body.
And then if the test comes back and it's hard to say this obviously because we want people to test, not guess, but that 4 lows pattern. So you've given a couple, some food recommendations. You said magnesium, calcium. So what would that supplementation look like for someone like that comes in that low pattern? Yeah.
So I would do the same things with potassium, like the food things we talked about. I usually add in Designs for Health, K+2 potassium. That's a really good potassium supplement. For the sodium, I stick with the sea salt. That's a great way to raise that. And then I usually do a really high dose CalMag. The one I've been using is from a company called Endomet. It's based out of the States. It's actually associated with the ARL lab. It has a really high dose of calcium, magnesium with the cofactors. But I only recommend that for people who are in 4 lows or who are fast metabolic types, because fast metabolic types tend to have really depleted calcium, magnesium. Most other people, they have too much calcium. And it's causing issues in their body. So I wouldn't take that without knowing your mineral levels.
And the CalMag, sorry, what was the name of that one? It started with an E, I think you said?
Endomet. So ENDOMET. Endomet.
Endomet. Okay.
Yeah.
And so the fast metabolic type. So how do we know our metabolic type?
So I can tell that from hair mineral analysis. So with the slow metabolic type, you see the really high magnesium, really high calcium, and then you see depleted sodium, potassium. And with the fast, you see the exact opposite presentation. So you see really elevated sodium and potassium, which the reason it's high is because excessive activity of adrenals and thyroid. So excessive adrenal activity will raise sodium, excessive thyroid activity will raise potassium. And if we think of, again, that, the high school chemistry class, like that, those universal solvents, the sodium, it like over dissolves the calcium and the magnesium. So it increases the burn rate. So fast oxidizers are at really great risk for severe magnesium and calcium deficiency.
And which I've interviewed Dr. Carolyn Dean. Her podcast episode is going live I think it's going live in July, but she talks about that 80% of us are already deficient in magnesium to begin with.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm. So,
yeah, and I would say it's like an extreme situation with the fast oxidizer, and they're the ones who are at really great risk for like cardiac arrest if their magnesium gets low, especially below 2 on a hair mineral analysis. And they're the ones who typically feel amazing immediately once they start getting their calcium magnesium levels up.
And what about do you have any books you recommend, or an app, or a website, anything you like?
Yes. So I would say if you are interested in kind of getting the basics of hair mineral analysis, I would recommend Dr. Rick Malter's book. It's called The Strands of Health. It's a really good intro book. He'll talk a lot about the stuff that I talked about. He also has a course, and it's a really good course. That one's great. And then there's a book, and I can't remember the title, but it's by Dr. David Watts. And he was one of the pioneers in hair mineral analysis. So he started doing it 40 years ago, and they tested tens of thousands of people. And his book is a really good intro book as well. If you try to get it on Amazon, it'll be really expensive, but you can actually call Trace Elements Lab and they'll give it to you for $25.
Okay. So Dr. David Watts' book, and you call Trace Elements Labs. Mm-hmm. And then Dr. Rick Malter, Molter?
Malter.
Oh, yeah. Malter. Okay. So The Strands of Health. Okay.
Yeah. Those are good places to start if you want to learn more about it.
Okay. And then you shared a success story there with us. Is there anything else you wanted to share as far as anything you've seen from your...
Well, I would say, I think the biggest success is just bringing this into my practice because, I think with gut healing and hormone balancing, it takes a lot of time to get those things, back into place. So in the meantime, when we're healing, a lot of times we feel like crap. With minerals, with supporting the minerals as you're going through a healing process, it just greatly enhances the way that you feel. People usually feel really good very quickly. They see like I said, they see an increase in energy levels, brain fog, that sort of thing. And for myself, I think I'm the greatest success story because I still have the worst labs of anyone I've ever seen in terms of all of them, gut testing, minerals, hormones. When I was sick, I still haven't seen anyone have as bad labs as I did. So it's really great because I've been able to kind of break free from that fatigue, get my life back. I'm an outdoor enthusiast, so I get to spend all the time outside that I want, whereas before I just had to be inside all the time. So it's been a really big shift in my own life, and being able to bring it to my clients has been life-changing.
Mm-hmm. As far as what exactly you did, because you said you were on birth control, you were on antibiotics, you had cystic acne and all these other things. So you then used the hair analysis, and then what protocol did you use?
Yeah, so I was a slow oxidizer. I had the 4 lows pattern originally. I think I'm genetically a fast oxidizer or fast metabolic type, but I kind of went into slow as I got sicker. Mm-hmm. And I had a lot of copper. And even to this day, I'm still dumping copper. It's been about a year and a half. I still have copper coming out, but at one point it was about 6 times the normal amount that was coming out. But it took probably about 6 months of getting my minerals balanced before my body even started eliminating. And then it was probably another year of just dumping huge amounts of copper.
And you're dumping it because you're testing regularly, or how do you know?
Yeah, I test every 3 months. So I know I'm dumping it because I test every 3 months. Also, you tend to know when you're dumping copper. It doesn't feel super awesome. But copper is, it makes you feel, it crushes your energy. It can cause a lot of insomnia, constipation. It's an emotional mineral, so it can cause a lot of emotional stuff. Yeah, so I definitely knew when I was dumping it. There's definitely steps you can take so that you don't feel as crappy. But when you first start dumping it, you tend to know that it's happening. But yeah, that was a big one for me. And copper is very much related to the skin issues I was having, to insomnia, to the fatigue. It's a big one with fatigue. So, and I've had estrogen dominance for years that I could never figure out, and nothing I did would shift it. So for me, it was the copper.
That was contributing to this. So people that are dealing with PCOS or endometriosis or fibroids, things like that, potentially
I know they have copper issues.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then especially again, if they're on, so so if we talked about the chicken or the egg, and especially if they've taken birth control, but even if they haven't, there could be something. So basically do the test. And how much is the test actually?
So it's a pretty inexpensive test. I don't remember the cost exactly, but I think it's under a couple $100.
Okay.
So it's, I would say relatively to other functional tests, it's relatively inexpensive. And one thing I just wanted to mention about the copper, one way that we get it is through our mothers. It's passed down in utero. So you may have never been on birth control, but if your mother was, you may have gotten copper that way.
Wow. Yeah, this is fascinating stuff.
Yeah, super fascinating.
And then you have a hormone assessment here that you can offer to people. Can you maybe share a little bit about that for us? Yeah,
it's just a quick self-test where you can kind of determine, in a really short amount of time, because we're all busy, if you might be at risk for hormone imbalance. Just a quick assessment that you can do and get a good idea, because I think a lot of us are wondering about our hormones, but we're not sure if that's actually what's going on.
Absolutely. Yeah. So you can check that out at Kendra, Kendra Perry, Perry.net. And you can do the quick assessment there and get some insightful information. Well, great. Well, thank you so much, Kendra, for coming on the podcast today. I really, really loved digging into this topic with you, and have yourself a fabulous day.
Thank you so much. I appreciate being here. Thank you so much.
Hey there, Sarah Clark here. So are you struggling to have your baby? First of all, please know that my heart goes out to you. I support couples worldwide who are struggling with infertility to conceive and have healthy babies. Women like Rita, who gave birth to her beautiful daughter after following my fertility coaching system. Or Danielle, who after 2 failed IUIs was able to get pregnant after a supercharger fertility discovery call with me. So here's how you get my help for free. So I offer a free Supercharger Fertility Discovery call. And on that call, I'll create a plan with you that is going to help you fast track your success. So this call is not for everyone. And I'm really picky about who I get to speak with. And I have a strict but totally reasonable criteria that needs to be met in order for us to move forward. So here's who I can help. So first of all, you need to be able to explore your infertility diagnosis in a new light. So this offers for people who are open-minded, they're coachable, and if you can do that and want to double or triple your chances at the fertility clinic or get pregnant, awesome. So let's get on the phone and chat. Also, you must be an action taker. So someone who's committed to seeing results, you're able to follow directions. Don't worry, I'm not going to ask you to do anything bizarre. But if you're one of those people who like to consume a ton of information, but don't like to spend time implementing and seeing results, then the call's not really for you. So I only want to spend time with people who are genuinely committed to their own success. So just click on the link in the show notes and apply, or go to fabfertile.com and click on the free consult. So it's a really short application that just tells me about your health, how long you've been trying to conceive, and how soon you'd like to be pregnant. So seriously, this is going to be the best time you've ever spent on your fertility. Looking forward to chatting. Talk soon. Thank you for listening to Get Pregnant Naturally. Seriously, it means the world to me that you're here. Make sure you hit the subscribe button so you can be notified of upcoming episodes. I'm excited to offer you a special gift. If you're a U.S. resident, text FERTILE to 345-345. You'll be prompted to enter your email address and you'll receive our fertility yoga download. In this 20-minute intro video, we focus on a calming and peaceful practice to connect back to your heart. These simple fertility yoga poses can help quiet negative thoughts and make you feel more in control. Download it now and get started today. So for U.S. residents, text FERTILE, FERTILE, to 345-345. For non-U.S. residents, go to www.yogafreebie.com to access your special gift. That's www.yogafreebie.com to access the free fertility yoga download. And I love this quote by Dr. Mark Hyman, medical director of the Cleveland Clinic Center for Functional Medicine and chairman of the Institute for Functional Medicine. Functional medicine is medicine by cause, not by symptom. Functional medicine practitioners don't in fact treat disease. We treat your body's ecosystem. We get rid of the bad stuff, put in the good stuff, and because your body is an intelligent system, it does the rest. Thanks for listening. Until next time.